In 2015, a modern European nation came within days of total financial collapse. Banks locked their doors, cash withdrawals were rationed, pensions were frozen, and the country that gave the world democracy, philosophy, and even currency itself was negotiating its survival with international lenders. This wasn't ancient history. This was Greece, member of the European Union, operating with one of the world's most stable currencies. And yet, it was on the brink of default, just like an empire in its final days. How did this happen? How does a developed nation, backed by global institutions and sharing a currency with Germany and France, end up begging for bailout after bailout? And why does this matter to you, even if you've never set foot in Athens? Because what happened in Greece wasn't just a local crisis. It was a modern case study in how the global financial system works, how debt becomes a political weapon, and how quickly a nation's independence can dissolve when the money runs out. Let's rewind. The seeds of this crisis were planted long before the headlines. Greece joined the euro in 2001, giving it access to cheap borrowing it had never known. For decades, Greece had been a high-debt, high-deficit country, but with the euro, markets assumed the risk was shared. Investors believed that Greek bonds were as safe as German ones. Suddenly, Greece could borrow at historically low interest rates. And borrow it did. Public spending soared. Infrastructure projects boomed. But while some money went into roads and airports, much of it fed a bloated bureaucracy and an inefficient tax system. Corruption and tax evasion were widespread. The government's revenues just couldn't keep up with its spending. And underneath all the optimism of the 2000s, the debt kept piling up. By 2008, when the global financial crisis hit, Greece was already in deep trouble. The collapse of Lehman Brothers sent shockwaves through the markets. Investors started scrutinizing government debt more carefully, and when they looked at Greece, the numbers didn't add up. In late 2009, it was revealed that Greece had been hiding its true deficit for years. The real figure was closer to 15% of GDP, for higher than EU rules allowed. Confidence evaporated. Borrowing costs skyrocketed. Greece was shut out of the bond markets, and in 2010, it had no choice but to seek a bailout from the European Union and the IMF. But bailouts don't come for free. The first rescue package, worth 110 billion euros, came with strict conditions, massive spending cuts, tax hikes, and pension reforms. These austerity measures were designed to restore investor confidence. In reality, they plunged Greece deeper into recession. GDP contracted. Unemployment soared to over 27%. For young people, it was over 60%. Public services were gutted, and the debt of everything the bailouts were supposed to solve kept growing. Because here's the math nobody likes to admit. When an economy shrinks, the debt-to-GDP ratio gets worse, even if you're repaying loans. By 2012, Greece needed a second bailout, this time 130 billion euros, along with a historic haircut for private bondholders, partial default in all but name. But the debt burden was still unbearable. The crisis dragged on for years, with each bailout bringing more austerity and less growth. In 2015, the Greek government held a referendum, and the people decisively voted no to the harsh bailout terms. But just days later, the government agreed to an even tougher deal. Why? Because the alternative, leaving the euro and declaring full default, would have been catastrophic. Greece's economic independence was gone. Key decisions about its budget, taxes, and spending were now dictated by the Troika. The European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. What happened to Greece wasn't new. The mechanics were ancient. Debt has always been a tool of power. In the 19th century, after repeated defaults, European creditors took control of the Ottoman Empire's revenues. The same happened to Egypt in the 1870s. Control of finances became control of the state. In both cases, the empire still existed on paper, but the real power lay with the creditors. And that's exactly what Greece experienced, not an occupation by soldiers, but a financial takeover. The Troika became a shadow government. For ordinary Greeks, the crisis was brutal. Pensions were slashed, hospitals ran out of supplies, and thousands of businesses closed. So why does this matter now? Because the same forces that crushed Greece are still at work. Look at emerging markets like Sri Lanka and Argentina, wrestling with debt and IMF programs. The names are different, but the structure is the same. Heavy borrowing in good times, crisis when markets turn, and dependency on external creditors when money runs out. Even advanced economies like Italy, Japan, and the United States have massive public debt. The difference is that large economies can delay the reckoning, but delay isn't immunity. Greece's crisis was about the loss of flexibility. When you can't print your own currency and you rely on external financing to function, you're not in control anymore. Your choices aren't your own. Debt is easy when times are good, but the moment markets lose confidence, the lenders become the fall of Greece wasn't a collapse. In the ancient sense, no armies, no conquest. But in practical terms, it was a surrender of sovereignty, and it shows just how fragile financial freedom really is. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.